Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Powering Progress podcast, where we look at how we can really make an impact and a difference and help to accelerate and navigate the careers of underrepresented talent. And within this, we speak with so many different leaders, people who have great insights and ideas to help support this journey. So really looking forward to the conversation today with our guest, Adrian Rollins. Adrian has got a wealth of experience in from 1992 to 2002. He played county cricket for Derbyshire and Northamptonshire, making more than 230 first team appearances and scoring more than 9,000 runs. And after retiring from professional cricket, he began work in education, and he's had many leadership roles in education all the way up, including Director of Mathematics and as Assistant Head and Deputy. He is now currently a proud head of a secondary school in the Midlands. So it's really great to have Adrian here to really look at this topic of underrepresented talent and power in progress. Great to have you here, Adrian. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Great. So we'll get right into it. And as we've just heard, so many different experiences that you can glean from. So really looking forward to hearing what you got to say. Firstly, for you, what does power in progress mean?
Well, for me, it's about having that sense of autonomy and understanding your personal power and how your choices can help determine the progress that you make, irrespective of what kind of blockages are put in your way in terms of what challenges you face. It's about understanding that ultimately, I remember watching a pastor say something once, which was powerful, which was your decisions design your destiny. And it's around that. So power in progress is about knowing your own personal power and how much power you have on your journey, despite all the setbacks that you are bound to face and that are inevitable, but knowing that you are still in charge of your journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I even just kind of paraphrase your bio and some of your experiences, and I'm sure there's been a wealth of kind of experiences you've gained. If you talk about even your upbringing, your schooling, your sports career, what things have come from those experiences that relate to how you can really power your progress?
I think when you go in professional sport, there's this initial notion that it's all about all in, it's all about the team, and invariably in team sports it is, but often what comes with professional sport are egos, and because to a degree you have to have a bit of ego because you have to be confident in your ability, but sometimes when you've got those egos in each other's pockets in the dressing room for months on end, it can be really, really difficult. For me, my learning from those experiences is in terms of particularly on reflection, because at the time when you think you're grown and you're not, you're still young, and my learning, what I got from those experiences was, upon reflection, was to stay on the path, stay on the pathway. You're there to do a job, but ultimately you're there to enjoy yourself. And I think the key thing around that is, and I remember seeing this actually in someone's kind of changing bag or sports bag, was kind of ride the wave and don't dig the grave. And I think that's the key thing, is about enjoying the journey. And that's what I learned on reflection when I was in the moment and I was a younger man, and you were dealing with some personalities that were extremely strong. I found myself kind of stepping back and going into myself, not because I didn't think things needed to be said. I thought it was just safer for me not to say them. And that can be either in terms of, you might be with international players, or it might be with the mere fact that you almost have to know your place in the dressing room. And I think upon reflection, I think there's a difference between knowing and respecting people for what they've achieved, but also knowing that you still have a voice and your voice has value. And that's the one thing I took from that. And that, again, that links to power in progress, knowing that you have a voice, and that if you are do things in a particular way, it's very difficult for things to go really challenged, apart from that, the fact that you might be challenging people's egos.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. And you talked about feeling safe, and I know firsthand that feeling of, shall I speak now? How am I going to be looked at? Especially when you're in environments when you're the only one, whether that's down to race or something else. I know you've even spoken before, your school upbringing and being the only black person to take A levels at the time. So many different experiences of being the only one
Yeah,
and the impact on the voice. And I imagine there are individuals right now having that same thought of
yeah.
should I raise my voice or not, or shall I just stay safe?
And that's difficult when you are the only one. I mean, in my school, I was the only male. There were females, but um, I think that's always the difficulty, because often if you're around your people in inverted commas, that doesn't mean that's the same kind of those people, friendship groups, family groups. You can often speak, not always, but you can often speak more freely. And then when you go into other environments, it's almost like the Tony Buzan thing. There was a book called Social Intelligence, which talks about how people adjust themselves in different environments. And it's almost like you to protect yourself, and you know that the potential harm that can come from you speaking out is that it could come at a price. So therefore, you kind of that staying safe is actually, let me just concentrate on my job. And sometimes where you see that kind of injustice to someone else, you might not say anything because you're worried that men then might come onto you, and that's really not right. But I think often if you are someone who looks like us, that's the choice you often can invariably make, because you almost feel like in that environment there isn't someone else to turn to.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a big part of what we're trying to do as well, to shine a light on some of the different experiences that people are facing, and how do we start to amplify the voices of those who maybe not been listened to, because that's part of the progress. We need to hear different voices. We need to hear different perspectives, and it's great to have you, as you said, you've got the experience within sport, with cricket, but then also, as we'll go on to, as a head teacher. And before we go into the kind of the education side of things, just that as you talked about voices, and we all know what's been happening in the cricket world over the past few years, and people talking about their experiences. And any thought around what we need to continually do to ensure that not only voices are speaking out, but actual voices are being listened to, and action is being taken?
I think one of the things that needs to happen is it's a structural thing to address. So you can have subgroups having conversations, and I'm all for those. But also, again, when you're in those groups, you feel safe and protected to have a voice. But at some point, there has to be a level of challenge, and that level of challenge is not necessarily challenging in a way that is, well, look, I'm being obstructive, but challenge in a way to actually put a mirror up and say, look, this is our experience, this is our lived experience, and therefore we need to have I'd like to have a discussion with you about it, because this is how it makes me feel. When these things happen, this is how it makes me feel. And I think when you're talking about that, you're not necessarily saying you or you are doing this. This is how, when you say these things, when these things happen, this is how it makes me feel. And I just want to make you aware of that. And that's where the conversations, I think that's how you approach the conversation, as opposed to, you're not doing this, you're doing this to me. Actually, I'd like to talk to you. And when you say these things, when you take those actions, this is just how it makes me feel. And this is how it makes me feel when it happens. And I think that's how you frame it. And then they say, well, that's up to you. Well, actually, it isn't what I want to have a conversation. This is because of these reasons. And I think that having that approach certainly helps.
Yeah. Again, there's so much around the need for conversation, and
Yeah.
I always believe the starting point for true inclusion is dialogue, and we need to create more of these spaces for open dialogue.
Yeah.
And you're not always going to like what you hear, but as you said, if it's framed in the right way, can we start to make real change, and have an
Yeah.
impact? Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so talking about other area, and again, we're really going to look at actually how do we really make change. And another area where there is, if we're being honest, a lack of racial and ethnic diversity is amongst school head teachers, and it's so important, given that we are raising the next generations, and we are working in diverse communities, but we're not being reflected in terms of the headship. So, yeah, interested to hear kind of your story and your progression in the first place to this position.
Yeah, it's been some challenges. I think for me, I mean, having a sports background helped to a degree, because you learn about ups and downs, and learn about challenge, and learning being in sometimes in helpful environments and difficult environments. When I entered education, I as a mathematics teacher, I came from a family of a lot of people were educators or working with young people, so that helped a lot. My mum at the time was probably 7, 8 years, 9 years into headship. She eventually did 25 years. So when I entered education, I knew that I wanted to be a head quite early, not straight away, but quite early, because there was a lack of representation and because I knew that my lived experience would something that young people in the communities I've worked in could relate to, but also not just for young people who look like me, but for all young people. Because often where you have racism, in particular, there's often in some communities where you have people who are impoverished, and then they feel like the reason why we don't have this is because of, and it's actually not about that. Many of our experiences are similar outside of the racism. So therefore, I just felt to be in the communities that reflect my experience and where I grew up and how I grew up, and that kind of combined community, I felt like it was a must. But I had to make progress. Obviously, I had to do my teaching, train, go through those various leadership experiences, which I was grateful for. Some of them were really powerful. Some of them, it was very clear that my voice wasn't welcome. But when it got to that point anyway, I had to make a choice. At one point, I was going to leave teaching, but I made a real clear determination that that I'm needed in this space. And because I knew I was needed in this space, I had to keep going. Because if I didn't keep going, how am I going to help someone who then finds themselves in that similar situation not to? So I did two deputy head roles, which I enjoyed both of those experiences. But at the same time, you can work for Ofsted whilst working in a school. So I did 4 years of that, including leading inspections. And that was unusual. I was one of very few Black Ofsted inspectors, particularly in my region. And that was a really invaluable experience where I could then take that school improvement learning that I'd learned in those various roles around various people. And I thought, now it's time. It's time for me to lead the school. So when I've been in this role for 2 years, I've enjoyed it thoroughly. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it's a privilege because I get to engage with young people who look like me. I have my experience and actually try to influence and say, actually, anything is possible. And there's different layers to that, whether academically, but also in terms of those young people who want to go, because a lot of young people want to be professional sports people, and that's all well and good, but you need a backup plan. And I think I'm kind of evidence of that as well. Because if it doesn't work out, then you need to get your education. So there isn't anything that people can kind of say to me, which can then reflect on saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Because the communities that I've served in my career are ones that are very similar to my experience as a child. So, and I think it is important for young people to see Black heads, and not just white, not Black kids, white, Asian, because they need to understand we are not this cliche that's pushed out in the media. So it's been a journey, and it continues to be a journey, but it's one where you are constantly learning about yourself as well, because leadership helps you learn about yourself. How do you manage situations where you are challenged, and also situations where you have to constantly think about how you can make things better. How can I make things better for the children in this environment? And how can I, engage the adults to be part of that? Because that's the role. It's about engaging adults to develop that strong leadership, so that young people benefit. And sometimes in leadership, you have adults who are on board, and sometimes not. And I'm not talking that's in this round, I'm talking about leadership in general. And I think that's something that you just need to work with, and you're constantly evolving as a leader, as long as you're constantly looking to evolve, because the landscape of education changes all the time. And I think about the community I currently serve, or ones that I have served as well. There's a lot of things going on for young people where you need that representation to actually steer some of those young people away from those, because they need to know that there are people who are there in education who look like them and they can steer them.
Yeah, and it's so important to kind of really dig deep into that, because shows the impact that it has, not just for individuals but for generations, as you said, for your own leadership, the impact for yourself, but then the ones that are looking up to you, and that in turn is going to impact the people they're around as well. So when we talk about whether we've done enough to create true diversity and true inclusion. And you get some individuals who probably said, "Oh, we've done all we can do, or we spent enough time on it." The reality is there is so much more to be done because there's so much that can come out from it. And I believe within schools that's so important because that's the breeding ground that sets the direction for where individuals are going to go, and then ultimately what they go on to contribute to society as well. So it's so important, as you say, that representation.
Yeah.
What
I,
do
I
you
I think it's vital. It's
yeah.
I don't mean it's just I think it's vital. I think it's necessary.
Mm,
We need a school workforce to be reflective of the community. It doesn't also make, but also reflective of society, because it doesn't necessarily mean if you're working in a all white area that you can't have a black head teacher, because you can,
mm,
and it's almost, I would say, not more important but equally important for, again, for people to understand that there are people, because when you have in those areas which you have just one community areas, their understanding of other people's backgrounds and cultures will be diluted because they haven't had that experience. It'll be based on what the media says, what's on the TV. So having that, I think, makes a big difference as well.
yeah, definitely. What would you envision your role to be as you continue on as head in shaping the future of kind of school leadership and everything around education?
I mean, I do a lot of work. I have done work with my mum with the NEU. It's called a course called Position for Success, where we're trying to develop black and minority ethnic or global majority leaders in schools. So I think my role is not just about me leading schools; it's about me developing leaders, and that's all leaders. So as I continue to work in education, my primary thing is to keep working on school improvement for the children and developing leaders, and that's how I see my career kind of continuing to grow, perhaps into a more expansive, perhaps as an executive head, or I don't think I'd want to be CEO of a multi academy trust. It's just I think sometimes that takes you too far away from the school, and it then becomes a more administrative role. But something where I'm in touch with schools, working with schools, developing them, working on school improvement. I think that's something I'm really passionate about, particularly in the cities.
Yeah. What would you currently see as still being the barriers for leadership progression, particularly for black males in schools in particular as well?
I think some of the barriers are stereotypes. There's a perception that if you're, I mean, I'm 6'5" and not tiny, is that the perception is I'm good for managing behavior.
Mm,
So often in leadership, you are put into a pastoral box. So black males, great heads of year, not often curriculum leaders, not often seen as being head of department, head of a subject, but great for pastoral work. And then there tends to be a ceiling on that. At best, assistant head for pastoral. So there's firstly that, remove that kind of perception. Or everyone's to work as a teacher, you have to be a qualified teacher. So we're qualified to teach a subject. So understand that we have that skill at that level. So that's the first thing. I think secondly is actually not seeing a black male head as a risk. But then that goes two ways, because as a black male, when you're looking at roles, you're thinking, could I fit into that role? Would that school accept someone like me
mm,
as the figurehead of that school? And people in their head go to little things, look on the school website. Would there be all those kind of things? And actually put part that to one side. So for someone who's aspiring to be a head, just focus on doing your job exceptionally well, because that being better thing still stands, but be exceptional, concentrate on being exceptional so that you are ready to step into those roles. Be constantly looking to learn, because it is difficult, but it's not impossible. So that's the thing. That's the advice I would give. The other advice is obviously to have that kind of training with Mats and with the recruiters to understand that. But there's also diversity in other ways. There's a lack of diversity in school governorship,
mm,
because so even in a community that's multi-ethnic and diverse, the governors often look the same.
mm.
So there's that investment in various ends, but the key thing if anyone's aspiring is to invest in yourself in that development. And then also from the other end is to have those conversations with those leaders. There's some training that in terms of whether they call it conscious or unconscious bias. I'm not an over big fan of the term unconscious bias because it always means like you don't know you're being biased. I think if you're being biased, you tend to know it.
Mhm. Yeah, so some really important points there, and I like how you also talk around the different angles that we need to cover this from. Obviously, teaching is so important, but then the parents, the governors. My wife literally 2 weeks ago, just got co-opted as a school governor, and it's because the school recognised that actually we need to have different perspectives. We need to fully represent our different communities to make a difference. So in a way, that still takes awareness and leadership from a head to say, well, who are we accountable to, and
Yeah,
how do we make that diverse and inclusive as well? So it's really interesting how far you can actually reach when you have the right level of focus on this.
yeah, I agree. And it is about that. And it's about, you have to be determined. I don't understand what us as the people, we don't understand that. No matter what industry it is, it's whether it's education, no matter what it is, we have to be. Sometimes we can get lost in so sometimes if you play professional sport or professional football, for example, it's not easy there.
Mm,
It's not easy. Arts in England football, when they go to certain parts of Europe where they get, it's not easy there. There's more representation, but it's not easy. Um, we know the landscape, and it's not about the sports. Unfortunately, there are too many people who are making decisions at a board level who have those biases, which gets in the way. Or there's too many people at board level who don't necessarily get in the way, but also they, when things happen, they don't challenge it.
mm,
So therefore, that makes you as an individual feel uncomfortable, feel like you're not supported, and therefore you retreat into yourself. And that's where it would happen for many people in education, where they're looking to progress. They're faced with certain incidents that might involve students, might involve other staff, are not fully supported. The sanctions or the disciplines that take place are not reflective of the seriousness of racism, and therefore people retreat and then lose that confidence and faith in the system. And that happens in obviously lots of industries.
yeah. What do you feel senior leaders need to be doing more of to create more inclusive environments and help those who are underrepresented to progress and show their true value?
I think it lies with employers. I think it does partly with some senior leaders across schools. It's just understanding and not pigeonholing. Some people, like I said, perhaps it's conscious bias or unconscious bias. Some people naturally have, or people have biases one way or the other, whatever type of food it, whatever. But in terms of helping people, again, it's about that education and training. And educators do need educating. That's why we have the teacher training and all those kind of things. There are just different levels of things that need to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A lot of the work we do is with large corporate organizations, and you already start to see where there are challenges and barriers and struggles that individuals are facing. Maybe they've come from schools or universities all ready to go, but then they're hit with these barriers and different structures that are maybe preventing them. What do you feel could be done more of in schools, whether it's to help prepare them, whether it's to kind of address some of these barriers? Do you see where there could be a better link between what schools are doing and what's happening in the world of work?
I think schools can do so much. I think it's about being clear. A lot of schools have policies around equality and inclusion, but it's about living it and living it to the point where when people do raise those concerns, that well, no, actually, they need to have that in place so that people are comfortable to raise concerns. Because people like think about going back to being safe. People they need to know that they're safe, and then there won't be some kind of retribution or something that takes place if people speak out about such injustices. Until you get that, you're always going to have an imbalance because people aren't prepared to speak up.
Creating that space and not just, oh, you've got your moment in the sun, that's it. This has
No,
got to be the culture. So I'm hearing it, we got to create that culture and the multifaceted way of thinking, and also to the fact that when someone speaks, it may not be what you want to hear. it may not be presented in the way you're used to it being presented as well. And that's something as well that I see can either push people back or make them not listen. Well, they haven't presented it in this way. They haven't used this language, or and again that fits into this thinking of you've got to be a certain way to progress. And we want to really change that because we know there's not just one way of doing things.
Yeah, exactly that. There isn't one way. And it isn't what there. This is not one way of doing things. There's not one way of looking at people.
Mm.
And others, and the only way you're going to really understand people's lived experience is by investing time to find out. And that means you have to make yourself vulnerable. Because actually, some of your behaviors was not right and it wasn't fair. And it's not about criticizing, but again, it's about having that open dialogue for people to be able to say things and not then feel like they have to watch their back afterwards.
Yeah, that word vulnerable, and as you said it, I was thinking about the vulnerability needed from both sides, really, because
Yeah,
I think you find whether it is a senior leader, whether it is someone who's maybe in a marginalized group, to learn and move forward, both sides need to show that vulnerability. How do you think we can create an environment where we're more able or more ready to do that?
that's a tough question. And the key thing around that is, again, is people who there's a lot of training that needs to go into giving people the space to do that, because and that will be variable, because the reason why I think society is where it is, where you have many people who are really supportive and really determined to see change and enforce change. And even at policy level, we see many organizations who have really invested in DEI or EDI, whichever way, and they really are invested. And a minute and they follow through. But there's a lack of consistency because there's a lack of people. There's not that consistency in people wanting to be accountable.
Mm.
Because for some organizations, that would result in the organization almost not existent, well, virtually not existing as it currently is. And are people prepared to do that? Absolutely not. Some people are not prepared to do that.
Yeah, and that's why this work needs to happen, and we need to kind of really ensure that we're shaping the future in the right way to make these changes. And as you said before, this is not easy. Like, if we could just click our fingers, of course we would do.
If I could, I would have done it a while ago.
Exactly,
Would have been less hassle.
exactly. Yeah. So, Adrian, what kind of, as we come towards a close, what advice would you give to a person, maybe they're on their working journey, they're navigating their career, they've got real aspirations to progress, to be a leader. What will be some of the key kind of words of advice for them?
Invest in yourself. Take time to invest in yourself. Invest in your own development. And once you've done that investment in your own development, I'm not just talking in terms of leadership and understand leadership, which is a big thing that you need to do. Speak to people, network. I'm in some WhatsApp groups with Black leaders, Black heads, which really helps in terms of my well-being and my own development. But just invest time in networking, invest time in yourself, but invest time in your well-being on that, because things happen. You have to be not ready when they happen, because things will happen anyway. But how you respond to that is going to be crucial to your development. And it's often, what am I learning from this? And also, what am I prepared to do as a result of it? Because that's the key thing. It's very hard in education or lots of areas of work where actually you make a decision that says, this is not for me. You either make that decision and then make the decision to do what you need to do after that, or you say, this is not for me, and you remain there. But then how does that help? And I know sometimes you might want to remain there to change how things are in the organization. And I do get it sometimes, because you want to challenge. But there's this thing that my mum said to me years ago, and it's always stuck with me. You can be a victim or a volunteer, but you can't be both. You got to make a choice.
Powerful words, powerful words. Make a choice. That's really, really helpful. Final question, Adrian, and you've answered it along the way. In all honesty, at the start, you talked about what power in progress is, what it means. What will power in progress look like for you personally?
I think I know I said something earlier about power in progress at this stage in my life will be almost powering the progress of the future generations, either in education but also for my own children. So it means me doing less for them, but also being a real positive steer for them and continue to try and be a positive steer for them for what they're doing. And none of them work in education currently, but I think it's about empowering the next generation because I'm at an age where I can see retirement somewhere in the horizon, not anytime soon, because I've got my mortgage. But um, you know, you have to start thinking of those things. So powering progress is about how can you empower others who are going to empower others again. So that kind of having that legacy, because progress doesn't happen in a vacuum and it doesn't happen just by yourself. It's about how you take others with you and then how they take others with them. So my key thing is about how powering progress for the future generations, as my mum did for me and has done for thousands of people in education. That's my primary purpose at this stage. Continue to help the community, whatever the communities I serve, but also empowering the next generation.
Right, I love that, and I love how it's linked to the next generation. We're not doing this for ourselves, so important, and to remind us of what really drives us. So, Adrian, it has been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I'm sure everyone listening will have taken so much from that as they look to power their own progress in their own different ways. So, real pleasure. Thank you very much. That is the end of today. Great, thank you. We'll be back for another great episode with another guest. So until then, keep powering your progress. Adrian, any final words?
No, just you've just got to, have broad shoulders, have a broad back, but also have know that you'll not be well. You've got to be well. You want to power your progress, you've got to be well, and that's got to be at the core of who you are. Stick to your core values, but focus on your wellness and the journey.
There you go. I think we've said it all. So be well. Look forward to catching you on the next episode. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.